Some of you might wonder why I do that at the beginnings of my videos, and you'll see me breathing, and it's very simple. It's just because I want to come back to myself before I go ahead and tell you all these crazy stories. So, that being said, today, in this video, as you might be able to tell by the title, I'm going to talk about fairies, and I'm going to tell a few of my fairy experiences, ones that are quite memorable to me, ones that aren't necessarily provable, per se, but that doesn't matter. It's about belief, so I don't know if I can prove it to you anyway. But for those of you who are curious about fairies, you might like it. I don't know, we'll see. I'm spending time with this beautiful plant here and soaking in some of the sun rays. I kind of want to talk about some of my times where I didn't talk about my fairy stories first, because as some of you may know, I have mentioned that in doing this video I am, I guess, overcoming an obstacle in my experience, in my mind, about speaking about these things. And I know lots of you are really open about this kind of stuff. Some of you might have had similar experiences that I have had with people, darkness, people not being so kind towards our experiences. And I don't blame these people. They were quite young. I was young, they were young. We were all very young. And, you know, we get told when we were children by adults that we should stop believing in such things. Luckily, I did not get told by adults, but unfortunately, that didn't stop the other children from telling me. So my parents were very open about certain beliefs and things. I remember, my dad's actually a scientist, if you didn't know this, but I remember sitting with him and speaking about all kinds of stuff, and he's had some very interesting experiences himself, and my mother is very open. So luckily as a child I wasn't discouraged from seeing or believing until I reached about age 12 or so, and I was still quite open about my beliefs in high school, and I got a lot of flack for it, actually. I remember being laughed at quite a lot and things like that. And funnily enough, I was a pretty stubborn person. I didn't care at that time. Until somebody I really loved told me that these things weren't true and I couldn't believe in them anymore. And that was quite difficult. That was the point where I think I really closed up and decided I didn't believe. And wow, like, a lot of my memories, up until my awakening, a lot of my memories of fairies and ghosts and mermaids and all these kind of beings, I remember that. I remember having the experience. The memory did not disappear, but I fully believed that I had made it up in my mind. It was like I was telling myself, oh, you know, this thing that I remember seeing, I just completely projected that with my mind and was lying to people and told people these things, you know, because of this or that. So I had somewhat warped my memory in my head just by myself, kind of creating this idea. And now, looking back, it's crazy. It's crazy for me to remember that these things did actually happen and that they're happening again. So there's, I get a little bit of, I don't even know. Today I'm like, it's hard to find the words. It's hard to speak about these things. If you cannot tell, I still feel that in my heart. It's hard to speak out loud about such things, and not that anyone should feel that way. I believe that we should be able to speak about our experiences and acknowledge each other's experiences, even if we don't fully believe them. Acknowledge that that did happen for that person in some way, because multiple realities do exist. Many things are real. At least that's what I think. So basically with these stories, I'm trying to help others who may have had similar experiences or may feel like they want to talk about these things even if they haven't. I just kind of want to open the discussion a little bit more and allow more room for these things, because we've been closed off for quite a while. It's not an uncommon knowledge that in the past people did believe in fairies, and they weren't always benevolent. No, that's definitely the case, that a lot of fairy tales were quite scary, but nothing that I'm going to talk about today was too scary, so there's that. And I feel like there is an opportunity here, a moment for this opening in the mind of many. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first I'm going to tell these stories individually, and I'll just tell them like a story, I guess. So I'll go chronologically from when I was younger to when I was older. I'm not going to tell every single fairy story I have, because oh my goodness, that would take me a long time. That would take a long, long time. It would be many things. So I've chosen a few, some that are quite general, and some that are a lot more specific and quite exciting. So the first one is general, and let's call this Fairies in the Bottom of My Garden. So I've got my little notebook here where I've written things, but we'll begin. Fairies in the Bottom of My Garden. When I was younger, we moved house a lot, and we lived in different houses. And whichever house we went to, I was always quite aware of the fairies. But the one house that really felt for me as if this was the place that the fairies lived, that house, we're still living there. My family still lives there in New Zealand. It's a beautiful place. It's what we call a lifestyle block, and it means that it is a very small farm. So we've got cows and sheep and chickens and neighbors and all kinds of things over there. And outside the house, if you walk out, there's a vegetable garden, and then you keep walking and you get to the shed and you cross over the fence. So you step onto a wooden stile and you lift your leg over, cross over, and you're in a paddock, and it's very overgrown, so there's lots of wheat and clover and beautiful, beautiful flowers and things. Lots of pine cones too. So you walk through this field, and you're walking through, you get to a gate. You open that gate. In that paddock are sheep, about 12 of them. Quite friendly, actually. I used to hang out with the sheep a lot. That's a real New Zealander for you. Oh my God. But if you kept walking, you would find my favorite spot in the whole vicinity of our house. And it was actually a jumble of rocks. So a big pile of rocks. And I have no idea how those got there. It's kind of like a mound, beautiful mound. And then there's all these rocks. And every summer, the foxgloves would grow there. These purple foxgloves, very beautiful, waving in the wind like little bells. So gorgeous. And just at the top of that mound, if you walk up, there's a tiny trail made by me, and right at the top you could sit in this kind of hollow area and look out, because below you from the mound was a valley, or is a valley. And in that valley there's native trees and birds, and you could see the wood pigeons swooping through the air. They do these cartwheels. It's really fun to watch. And I would just sit there. I would go there on days when I was happy, when I was sad, when I needed somebody to talk to, that kind of thing. I would make my way out to that little mound and go and sit there. And it became immediately apparent to me that first time when I was out there that there was something quite special about the place. I remember my brother and sister had claimed different areas of the farm. We had this kind of game. It was like find your own spot, I guess. And I claimed that one place. They claimed it was like a maze through these bushes and things. They were small enough to get through, but that was my spot. So I would go there. And over time, it became more and more apparent to me why this place was so special. It used to be quite windy. Sorry if you can hear a plane. But it used to be quite windy in that area. The wind would rush through the valley, and if you sat there, all your words would be ripped from your mouth and thrown into the wind. Nobody could hear you. So I used to sing a lot and pray and go there just to cry even sometimes. I remember going there once to scream. Nobody would really hear you, but I felt like no person heard me, but somebody was listening. And I remember the day when I saw them. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps now. I saw them in the wind. They were fairies, of course, and they were very light, kind of like if you've ever seen clouds that are really wispy, just like paint strokes in the air. These fairies, they didn't have that kind of human form unless you were able to picture it in your mind's eye. What I saw, I guess, was both a part of physical reality, seeing with my natural eyes, and also understanding through my third eye, so being able to see beyond into the veil. And so I was able to see both forms at once, but in the physical reality, these forms undertook what looked like almost feathers or clouds, wispy little bits floating through the air. And they were listening, and they started replying to me, which was very special. This was quite early on, and so going out to that one spot in the back of the garden felt like I was being with friends. It was really wonderful. They're quite dear to my heart, actually. I'm thinking about these fairies, and I love them so much. In folklore or modern myth, I'm not sure, these types of wind fairies or air fairies are called sylphs. So if you look it up, it's S-Y-L-P-H, sylph. And yeah, they just hold the elements of air. And funnily enough, I'm connecting the dots now. breath and air and things like that are often thought of as elements of communication. So if you think of the throat chakra and air and your breath and how you form words and how words travel, sound and things. So it was perfect. It was a perfect place and perfect elementals to listen to my stories. So that's number 1. I know it was very long. I hope you liked it. Interesting, right? There's going to be a lot of planes flying over. On a little side note, just about the fairies in the bottom of my garden, the bottom of our garden, there was always a lot of amanita mushrooms growing there, and don't know about you, but I feel like those are fairy houses, I really do, and I would just go check them out. I'd be so excited, like if it had been raining or the different seasons were changing, I'd go and I'd check and I'd be like, are the fairy mushrooms out? Okay, now, second story, and this one is pretty intense, remembering it for me. This was when I was younger as well, at the same property, and it involves a tree. So it's not directly related to fairies in the traditional sense. I didn't see, a fairy with her wings or whatever, but because I associate fairies quite often with plant beings, the spirits of other beings, plants and things, I did associate this with fairies. You might even be able to call it a dryad because it was a tree that I'm talking about. So there was this one tree, and sadly they've cut it down recently. My heart was broken. But it was an old tree, and part of it was dead and part of it was still living. A giant pine tree, absolutely huge. I'm just looking at the wasp. This giant pine tree, it stood as a kind of guardian right on the barrier of our driveway. And so I used to go to this pine tree, and after a while I discovered that I could climb it. If I was able to get up the first part when I was tall enough, I could actually reach the branches and then climb up. And I would climb up quite a ways, probably like 10 to 15 meters or so, up into this huge tree and lie there on this big branch, and I would just rest my back and spend some time with that tree. It was really lovely. Sometimes I'd read up there, to the delight of my mother, of course, and just really enjoying it, watching. Also, I like to spy on people. I don't know if you guys do that or not, but I like to observe people, and so in that tree I could kind of watch the goings-on of the farm below me. But there was this one time where I climbed that tree, and I was up there for a while, and something really strange happened. It was very sudden as well. There was no warning, so I was laying there with my back against the trunk, which was huge trunk, and all of a sudden I felt something, and I opened my eyes like that, and it was as if somebody was trying to cut down the tree. That's my first thought, to be honest. I thought that there was a reverberation coming from within the tree, kind of like if you hit, you've got those little, what are they called? Things that you hit them and they reverberate and the sound moves through it. So tuning forks, that's what they're called, of course. So that tree suddenly vibrated as if it had been hit by something, but that vibration came from within, and moved up through the tree. It was very, very strong. And I looked down and I was like, what the heck was that? You know, because it really startled me. There was nothing there. And it happened again and again. And it was very constant. It was so constant, it almost felt like a heartbeat. It freaked the hell out of me. I was first looking for whatever this thing could be, you know, worried that this tree was being cut down while I was in it. And then there was nothing there. And I'm looking around and there's nothing to be causing this kind of vibration. And I'm just thinking like, what the freaking hell is this? And as quick as I could, I skedaddled down because I'm like, no, I can't do this right now. But after, like, I get down, I realize, you know, there really is nothing causing this. And perhaps it was just me thinking this was happening. So I put my hand, you know, to the tree. And I'm like, okay, is it still happening? And yes, it was. This thing, this pulse of life was happening so physically strongly that I just ran down the driveway. I was like, screw this. Ran down the driveway and, okay, I know some of you are going to be like, why did you run away? I mean, some of you will be like, you know, that was amazing. That's so exciting. Why, you know, why were you so scared? I'm going to tell you guys, it's all well and good to have, you know, these ideas of, oh, I would love for this to happen and things. And I, you know, I want things to happen. I'll invite them and stuff. But when it really does happen in the physical reality in such a way as so that you cannot deny it happening, it's actually kind of scary because it's like something in your mind has, you know, this block, this mental block saying, that's not possible. Is that possible? It's not possible, right? So it can be a little bit scary, and I've had the same thing with, you know, visits from other places. It's often kinder of them to do it within dreams or things where we have less of that mental block. So yeah, basically, it was a little bit scary. Okay. Hopefully it doesn't do that again. Don't do that again, camera. I don't know what it is. Fairies are messing around with my camera. Whoa. Can you hear that? That's the wind. It's pretty strong. Wow. That's really cool. Okay. So that story, that last one about the tree, I think I'll call that the Pulse of Life story. That sounds cool, right? Now, what am I going to tell you about next? Okay, so the next story, what shall I call it? Let's call it the Grinning Imp. That sounds cool, right? This is actually one that happened after my awakening, my reawakening into the spiritual. If you don't know, guys, I actually went through a period of time where I felt, you know, so disenfranchised with my spirituality, and I felt like none of it was real. And yeah, basically, then I had this reawakening period where I decided, no, that's not the right word. I'm going to talk about it in another video, okay? I'm going to explain what happened because honestly, it wasn't really my decision. It was more of a pajam, like it happened. And if I'm brave enough, I think I'm going to tell you my starseed story at the end of this month as a kind of like grand finale to this October series, and also a gateway into your understanding more of where I'm coming from and I guess like telling you what's really important to me, because to reveal my starseed story is to kind of reveal who I am and what I'm here for. It's a big deal. So, we'll explain that later. But for now, I'm just going to say I had an awakening, and after that, I began to get these kind of experiences again. I got like a lot of different abilities coming back, and I could feel things and see things and craziness. Really amazing to have that come back to me. It was like being blind and then being able to see again and realizing that I had been blind without knowing it. So, very interesting. Now, about like a few months after my awakening, I was still working as a gardener. I worked for a landscaping company here in Colorado, which I really loved. It was so much fun to be out all day outside in the plants. Great, I loved it. And of course I had a lot of really awesome experiences. A lot of them actually were to do with animals at that time, which I'd never really had before, but some of them were quite, let's say, esoteric. They were still in this realm of fairies that we're talking about. And one very short story that I have, very small experience, but really struck me, was quite strange, was this moment that I had. I was in a garden at a hotel, actually. We were gardening this hotel, and I was walking between the pot plants, and I looked up, and just over there, over the way, there was this little stone fence around part of the flower bed. And sitting on that stone fence, in my mind's eye, so projected there, and much less in the physical reality, was this imp, this little man, very small, kind of probably about yay high, swinging his legs, sitting there, looking straight at me and grinning, like this huge grin. And it was very weird to like suddenly experience that, you know. I'm thinking about something else, I look over and then I see this thing in my mind's eye, and it's like, whoa, okay. He's looking at me, he's smiling. He knows I can see him. It's kind of interesting. He didn't scare me, but he did feel a little bit mischievous. Quite mischievous, actually. I was kind of like, do I want to know who you are? But that was the imp that I saw. And then the last story I'm going to tell you is very recently. It's a little bit. It's a nice favorite of mine from recent weeks gone by, and it involves a tree just over that way, and also a gnome. And how should we call this story? I'm trying to think. The story of the midnight gnome escapades. That sounds kind of ridiculous, but basically, I was going out on a full moon. I woke Oliver up, so I'm like, wake up, we're going out. And it was about 12 o'clock at night. And it was a special night because I had decided I was finally going to, it was the right time, I was going to cut the branch for my staff. If you don't know what that is, it's like, you know, imagine Gandalf, staff thing he holds. So I was going to cut the branch for my staff because I had earlier that day found this apple tree after asking for a sign for what kind of branch I could use, and I had been searching for a long time, and I'm walking along, and I'm like, please let me find the right branch, and instantly come across this beautiful apple tree that I just felt was like such a perfect synchronicity. I stood there talking with that dryad for a while. So I have these experiences quite often now where I do communicate with them, but this one was very special because not only did I see that night, in my mind's eye, I saw really physically these things. And so I came back that night to the apple tree with Oliver in tow. He's like zombied out, and we're going along, and I have a saw with me, so it did look quite comical. It was like us walking through the village in the middle of the night with a saw, very odd. But we come to the apple tree, and no, let's get back a bit, because honestly, I started seeing things before that. It felt so incredibly buzzy that night, like the moon was out and there was something in the air. And as I walked along one of the roads here, I experienced this feeling of going through almost a doorway, as if I went through a portal or something, and I started getting the feeling that the tree spirits were out walking, which often if I meet them, they're kind of closer to their home, and I got this feeling that they were out and they were out and about. So then I started to see things in the physical reality, and that was quite interesting. They showed up as shadows, basically. Imagine that, you see, it's like something from some ghostly movie. You see a shadow shift and move across your vision, that kind of thing. So there were things going on in the distance, and I'm like walking along, and I get to the tree, and I have this ceremony where I ask for the branch and all this, very reverent stuff. Like you really want to ensure that there's a definite yes being said. Okay, there's a plane, and I'm also going to check, because my camera is playing up on me today. I don't know if it's the fairies thinking this is like really funny, but I'm just going to check that it's still recording, because it didn't record before. Okay, good, okay, right. We're still good, we're going, we're rolling. So I'm at that tree, beautiful apple tree, and I complete the ceremony where I'm talking with that tree, and then I look over, and not joking, guys, I see in the physical this little man, little creature, scuttle across my vision. And in the distance also, a pine tree dryad, one of those ghostly kind of figures, like in a shadowy type figure, just kind of peeping out, both at the same time. And this little gnome guy, like, it's one of those things, because I know I'm going to get questions about this, like, did you really honestly see this? Yes, I did. But it was, again, one of those things like the sylphs, where it was like both the physical and the mental image merge into one. So I see something in the physical moving across the path, running, little guy, and then in my mind's eye, I'm able to complete the picture. So it's hard to explain, but hopefully that makes sense. And the funny thing is, this story is not finished, so I like to go back to the apple tree, and I like to take my staff with me and kind of relate, how things are going, and like just talk. It's one of my favorite trees to go and talk to, if that doesn't sound too weird. And I went back recently, and I saw the gnome again. Oh my gosh, so he really does live around there. And I saw him, just kind of at the base of the tree, and he scuttled around, and then, funny, he turned into a rock. He turned into a rock that looked exactly like a gnome sitting at the base of the tree. It was great. I was like, oh, there he goes. And I move around, and then there's this rock, and it's got like a little pointy hat and everything. And I wanted to say, that can happen. Don't worry if you think, like, oh gosh, how do I say this? Basically, trust yourself, trust your instincts, because these things, they can morph, they do live in that like shifting moment of, is it real, is it beyond the veil, is it that kind of thing, and in the physical, they can morph into real things that we see, that often, if you look close enough, you'll know. When we were in Iceland, we saw that a lot. A lot of the locals would see into the reality of rocks and things, knowing that they were trolls or dwarves, stuff like that. So that was pretty cool. That was very recently. That's the last story I'm going to really tell you about, but I've decided I'm also going to share a kind of video about how to see fairies, and it's going to be the only one I'll do for this October series about how to see things, because I don't want to share about how to see ghosts. I don't know if everyone should know about or wants to know about that. I don't know the motives behind people wanting to see ghosts, or there's other beings that I could tell you about, definitely. I'm happy to talk about, dragons and mermaids and things like that. But when it comes to ghosts and spirits, I don't really necessarily want to mess around, because I'm not an expert. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to be able to see them or to go looking for how to see them. Fine by me, do it if you want. But I am saying that I am not an expert on how to do that, and I don't feel like I am qualified enough to be able to instruct anyone. So I think the only real instructional video I'm going to make this October will be about how to see fairies. And if you're interested in that, I've got a lot of ideas, a lot of tips and different insights from my experience. One of these days, I'm actually going to make a course. I'm just going to tell you that. I'm going to make a course about how to see fairies, how to work with fairies, what kind of fairies there are, different things like that. Folklore, working with, both ancient and modern, and plant fairies, and fairies to do with place as well, like fairies that are tied to a certain place. I really want to give my knowledge in some form, so I am going to make a course in the future, but for now I'll make a little video, and hopefully that can be kind of instructional for those of you who are like, oh my god, I really want to see them. So thank you so much, guys, for watching this and being so open-minded. I know that most of you watching this are my friends and my soul family and things, and I am so grateful for your support, because it means that I feel comfortable enough to be able to share this. So continue what you're doing, continue to see and be open-minded, because you are allowing other people to live their reality and tell their own truth. You are creating space for that. As usual, go in peace. I love you all so much. Have a wonderful week.